All right, let's go ahead and get started with our February meeting. Welcome, everybody. Hope you're all doing well. Let's pull up the agenda here real quick. Sean, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't believe the minutes were uploaded.
No, we're behind. I meant to send out an email to everybody. I'm sorry. Bad timing on a few things we're juggling, and so we don't have minutes. But we'll include that in next month's packet. So sorry about that.
No worries. So do you want to give us the financial update then?
Yeah, let me. Yeah, I can. I mean, I can share my screen, but no changes. So we're still at 65,597 in the 402 account, the municipal arts fund account, and then in the 403, we're at 3,961 and 65 cents. So no changes.
Perfect. Any questions from anybody regarding financials for Sean? All right. Well, with that, let's go ahead and start going over the public art agenda. Nick, if you can lead us through it.
Yeah, I guess starting with projects, all of our 1% projects are under contract. And moving along, Sean, are there any fine details that you want to update on with those?
Yes, so I just got an email from T3, which is the Switchyard Park group, today actually. So I'm going to need to circle back around with, I believe Karen and Babette were on the initial History Center call. So it looks like that project is going to be complete by May. So that's really exciting. So that's our first like concrete physical project out of this string of projects. So it looks like May will be the Switchyard Park project with T3 on both sides of this the splash pad building. I'm trying to get an update on a timeline for Esteban's project. He's already started to schedule some workshops. So we have our first workshop scheduled with the mill for actually next week with their kind of members, since they're kind of geographically tied pretty close to the Trades District and Parking Garage. So I'm trying to get an update on that, on if that project could be fast tracked potentially. The parking garage for 4th Street will open in August. As of right now, we're working on the timeline to be somewhere around then for the public art installation, since it is so tied to the building, and we don't want to be too off on that because it could potentially impact use of the parking garage. And then the Trades District Gateway is probably Q4 of 2021. So that will just give you an overview of the next year. So might be digital, might be in person. It also probably depends on the artist and where we are with COVID for dedication ceremonies. But I'll start to work with this public art planning committee about that. Moving on now that we kind of have rough deadlines.
Very good. Does anyone have questions about any of the 1% projects? Okay, then a quick update on the public art master plan. Our committee had a meeting last Friday where thankfully several folks had contributed some copy to some of the sections that we divvied up amongst some people. We're able to review that, get some feedback, ask some questions. And the hope is that by our midpoint check-in, in a week and a half or so, or a couple weeks rather, we will have more copy in there. And I will have an opportunity to spend the subsequent couple weeks ahead of our next committee meeting looking for redundancies in the document, ways we can reorganize things to make sure that the strength of the message and the way it's delivered is there. And then we'll bring it back to our committee meeting and review as a group. But yeah, it feels like we are making some progress. Other folks that were in that committee meeting, any specific things that you would like to highlight or for those that weren't. Any questions you might have? Okay. Then I think that's all I have on the public art staples, unless anyone has anything else.
I'm good. All right. Essence, will you give us kind of an update and lead us through all the information regarding the grants, please?
So I'm gonna start with B. We finished reading for the Recover Forward BUEA, or scoring those applications this past weekend. I'm sure Sean will have a little bit more information about when the actual announcement will come out. And I'll let you talk about that. But now we're switching gears and preparing for the BAC spring grants, which according to the strategic plan calendar, we're hoping to launch it by the end of February, but I think maybe the beginning of March, it will give a little bit more room, especially since we are considering adding individual grants to this. Quentin just popped on. He wrote a proposal for us, actually, that was really great, proposing that and giving us a reasoning behind these grants for individuals. Hey, Quentin, you just popped on. I'm not going to put you on the spot, but
Go ahead and put him on the spot. He can speak to
it. Okay. Quentin, you want to talk about your proposal?
Oh, wait, okay. Now I'm unmuted. I don't know how far Essence got in sort of speaking about the proposal, but it was just, can you still not hear me? Okay.
We can hear you. We're just saying, like she just mentioned the existence of your proposal when you popped in. So
okay, perfect.
Give us all everything.
So let's maybe I can pull it up, and that'll be easier because then I can just talk straight down it. It'll give everyone a better idea instead of me just like yakking. Let's see. Share screen. Okay, can you go see the emerging artists production grant? Okay, so this is it. So I'll just do a quick sort of rundown. So the goal is to create a funding stream to support emerging artists, which simultaneously boosts the production of engaging artistic and sort of cultural opportunities for residents of the city. Recently, we've been talking a lot about how to sort of encourage sort of more art making and sort of how do we use our time to actually support the community in sort of different ways. And so I think that this funding stream could help us to do some of these things, meeting some of our community engagement goals that we've been talking about with Bryony and Babette. And so I set aside a proposed funding stream for $10,000 as a set aside out of the larger grants. I initially said, this is just an idea, I put 20 grants at $500 a piece, but I think Essence was thinking about $10,000. I'm not 10,000 guys, 10 grants at $1,000 a piece to individual artists. And a part of the rationale was just they're setting these grants, setting this money aside, these small grants for public facing or digital culture events gives us an opportunity to help sort of personally develop individual artists and also to sort of extend our impact, which was something that we've been talking about lately. Like, how do we actually get people not only just know about what the BAC is, but to actually see that we're doing things in the community beyond sort of meeting those goals related to our creating of the strategic documents. Sort of by selecting these artists, the commissions, we can attach our own branding, some of the things to the events, as well as create a community calendar of events that we are sponsoring, and offers an opportunity to meet several of our goals, sort of supporting emerging artists, increasing community engagement, and supporting the number of diverse artistic and cultural offerings available in the city. I thought that this was important, in particular now, because we've been in the pandemic for about a year now, and I think that I know to me personally, I think that it's important that we continue to support nonprofit organizations. But at this point, like the little bit of money that we're going to give somebody is like not gonna save the farm. Like the organizations that have made it this far, $2,000 will probably be useful, but realistically, they have much bigger goals, much bigger needs, and so this way, we can not only help to develop individual artists, but to actually create events and sort of opportunities for people throughout the city. And so I was thinking, I don't know if Babette has talked, but Babette actually, a part of what I was thinking about in her community engagement hours is thinking about how to broadcast to support other artists and not necessarily sort of just continually trying to introduce ourselves and these sort of arts organizations. And so even thinking about how we might use some of these people to host those community sessions, to host those community hours. And at the bottom, I sort of put addressing potential barriers, because I know there's often a lot of worry around giving individuals money, checks, and then what if they don't complete it? And sort of thinking about ways to maybe head off some of these things, including sort of maybe upping the requirements for the project plans, and also thinking about other ways that we could use them to help promote. So like maybe completing a brief blog or vlog and having to attend some of the community hours as well as sort of host them. And so, that's where we are. That is the emerging artist grant funding stream. And so I presented this to Essence, I think about a week and a half ago. So maybe I don't know, what is time anymore? But we presented this to Essence. And so I think we'll be thinking about how to move this forward through the grants committee.
Yeah, so from here, what we need to do as a committee is set the dates for the grants. As well as set the dates. Sorry, my son is talking in the background, even though I told him to be quiet. Set the dates for the grants, set the dates for the workshops and the one-on-one conversations that we want to have with the public, and making any updates to the actual applications as needed. And we can get started on that conversation through email. Rachel's going to send me some of the documents from the past years to help me get started. And hopefully we can get those dates set by, if not on the day of our next grants meeting. And then Sean, anything that I missed, please.
Yeah, I was going to say, Sean, are there any dates that we need to meet for fiscal reasons or any other?
Nah, I mean, just by the end of the year, right? Just so you know, my camera's here, but I have dual monitoring. So, no, that's Quentin. Thank you. That's an amazing proposal. Thank you for spending time on that. That's really exciting and really awesome opportunity for us to consider. And I look forward to digging into that. The only thing, in essence, is the IAC. So for the rest of the commission, you all should join in on the next grants committee. I will have Anna and Paige from the IAC to talk about their funding this year and what grant programs they're doing, and just to make sure we're working in tandem, or if there's a scaffolding that we need to consider, those kinds of things, or if there's budget concerns coming from them from the state level. So they'll be joining us for about 15-20 minutes. I told them not to try to take up too much of the meeting at the grants meetings, just so we could work with them and see what's going on in the state. So that's that. But I want to provide more space for Quentin's. That's amazing. I do have some updates on the RF stuff, but we can wait on that.
Yeah, I would love to hear feedback for Quentin, especially from those folks who are not in the grants committee who are going to be part of hashing it out if we choose to move forward with it.
I think it's really exciting. I think it's such a great and targeted way to make us more visible as a commission, and also, really support artistic development at an early phase. I think it'll be really interesting to define what emerging means. I think it's a term that a lot of folks have different ideas about what that means. So I would just think about different ways of defining that, whether it's in terms of, sometimes it's age, but it doesn't always have to be. It could be how long their CV is, things like that. And then another note, I favor the more money, less recipients, just thinking that $1,000 could really be a windfall for an emerging artist. So that's just my perspective on it, but I'm super excited. This is excellent.
I mean, and nothing says that you can't have 5 at 1,000 and then 10 at 500 or something like that.
Well, you know, we were talking about a few different projects at the public art meeting, and I was thinking how this could tie in. Where Sean was talking about some things that maybe doing posters, trying to find, you know, news sites, and I feel like. And also where Quentin was tying some other things into the community hours, etc. And I think there's some fantastic concepts and ideas that all kind of interlap, and that maybe we're losing some of them because there's so much. Because I personally, I think this is fabulous. I think the idea of having funding that's able to reach out to a broader, more unique base is really important, an important function for us. And the other point that he makes is getting the community more engaged in what we do, and us more engaged in what we do. So I'm just wondering how we can, whether there's a transcript that we can make of these meetings so we're not losing some of all these great ideas, or what, so we can act on more of them.
Yeah, all of that is captured in the minutes, and they're all online. We can always go back and review them.
Oh, the detail of it. Okay.
Yes. Any pros or cons for this idea?
But will we need to come up with projects, or would we be just a broad base? It would be within the grant program, or how would mechanically it work?
I think it has to be separate from your traditional project and organizational grants that we do. It needs to be its own little project and have its own dates and its own process. I think that we have to find a balance between just spreading the word and seeing what comes in, and because it would be our first year doing this, reaching out to the network and being like, hey, this is happening. I know that you do this. How about, you know, kind of instigate that little seed, a bit of a inquiry in terms of interest or possibility, and start to spread the word like that as well. Not just rely on the masses coming to us, because nobody knows about it, and our track record of communication is still quite splotchy. And so while we're making an effort to get better at it, I don't think we're going to be, you know, in everybody's inbox in the next 3 months.
Well, I think too, it's important to keep in mind, you know, devil's always going to be in the details on this, but I think it's a good starting point, and we can kind of investigate how we want. I dropped this in the chat just so the other people know. Any kind of grant that the city gives, you have to, if it's over $1,000, you have to be enrolled in E-Verify. It's just a state requirement. Indiana is very conservative about that. It's a hassle, frankly, for people going through that, especially if they're individual artists. So maybe lowering that cap, or maybe making it 750, right? Like, we can work through those things, but that's just something to keep in mind. There's also political reasons why people wouldn't want to maybe do that as an artist or an art collective, because it has to do with immigration. So there's a variety of different things we can discuss around that. I think, to Babette's point, I think it's really, I think in the first go around, I think thinking through what the community needs are and what the artist needs are should probably come first. We at the city have not really prioritized artist needs. We have relied on the stimulus packages for, you know, unemployment insurance and those kinds of things, but all the displaced workers in terms of teaching workshops and all that kind of stuff. I think it's important for us to not force fit a project first, especially coming out of this previous year. and just kind of see what the needs are around that, and kind of engage in that kind of. And we kind of saw that in the RF round that I'll talk about here in a minute. But that's just some things to throw some spaghetti on the wall and see what sticks with you all.
Any other thoughts? Quentin, any last words before you take this to the committee meeting?
No, I'm good. Like, thank you all for letting me present. I'm looking forward to it. Looking forward to seeing what we get to do with it.
All right, Sean, give us the update with the RF.
Yeah, so thanks to Essence and Elliot, we had a quick turnaround because we kind of delayed our timeline initially. So we were able to make recommendations today to the BUEA based off the scores we got. A pretty interesting subset. It's not public yet. I just literally finished emailing all the applicants today based off of their status. But we awarded about $42,000. We had 2 venues that qualified under the venue mechanism. We had a lot of first-time applicants, so almost 8 or 9 first-time applicants, which is a pretty good increase. Some individual, some artists of color or organizations of color, you know, like being the forefront of that, being led by that, which is really important for the BUEA. And that was a big framework, actually, that the reviewers were really scrutinous on, was the equity and inclusion efforts, which I was really glad to see by the BUEA board members being really concerned about that. So as we move forward, that's just something we want to kind of maybe work in tandem with BUEA and our grants program, but just in general, how arts organizations are talking about equity and inclusion. We had some that just didn't score very well because they didn't really address the question or the historical. I think we frame it around historical legacies of power and what you're doing as an arts organization or an individual artist. So hopefully we'll get the press release out next week for that. But overall, the BUEA was really happy. These also, similar to kind of Quentin's point, some of these projects, and I think what was really nice because of the moment we're in, and Rachel can also attest to this historically with how the BAC has historically scored grants, is we've never reconciled, does the grant opportunity trigger a potential project? And do we believe and trust in the organization or the artist to complete it? Or do they have to have all their, you know, ducks in a row and everything secured? And so I think because of COVID, that kind of pressure for both applicants and reviewers have been kind of lifted, which is, I think, a net positive, because we can kind of investigate whether we believe in the power of the project or the program, and do we want to invest in that? And that's been the kind of shift in philanthropy over the last 5 years, frankly, is looking at it that way rather than, now we do want to see committed partners and all those kinds of things. So we might want to consider, submitting emails of committed partners as part of an application and stuff like that, especially with this like emerging arts grants. So that's just something to think about. But it was overall, like I said, the BUEA was very happy. We have reserved a little pocket of money. It's about 20 grand left in that RF fund. And the BUEA is holding on to that because of venues. And so because we don't know what the Save Our Stages Act is going to do, I don't know if you all saw that there was a New York Times article about this. There's some concern about big music promoters, places like potentially the NFL could qualify, right? Which would be insane. And so making sure that nobody on the local level is cut out of, I mean, it's 15 billion, but if you think about across the United States and how many venues there are, that's not a lot of money. So that's just something that, as a staff member, I'm concerned about on the local level, places like Comedy Addict, Backdoor, Bishop, Bluebird, the real venues that do make Bloomington, and making sure that there's not going to be a stopgap in funding around that. So that's a lot to throw out and talk about. I'm happy to answer any questions, or if Elliot or Essence, if you notice things in your reviewing applications, anything you want to add. But I appreciate you all doing that on a short time frame and getting that around. Yeah, it's great. I mean, we've been able to continue to throw funding back out in the community pretty quickly, which is positive, a net positive.
Questions? All right, no questions. Essence, do you have any last items regarding grants?
No last items. I just wanted to say that I could see some improvement in the quality of the grants applications. Like there was one organization who I'd read an application from before, and I remember that the quality of it, like the writing, and their argument, like for their case for getting funding, it was just stronger overall this time around, and I was happy to see that. But other than that, back to you.
Sounds good. All right. Moving on to the next item on the agenda. It's the strategic plan and kind of like its different parts and updates. I'll start with, I had my first quarterly meeting between Arts Forward Bloomington. I had Ken Buzzard attend, and Arts Alliance of Greater Bloomington with Rachel Himsel, and also Adam, who is the leader behind Artisan Alley. Oh, hold on. Is the mail arriving? That's the one thing my 4 dogs do not care for. And Adam from Artisan Alley, who is actually starting to take over the leadership of Arts Alliance. And Rachel is going to start to take a step back. So that is a big update. Overall, we had a great conversation. It was slated for 30 minutes. We went over an hour, where everybody was very interested in hearing what the others were doing and kind of where the overlap is, and realizing, oh, I wasn't aware that you were doing this, I was doing this. And for example, Ken and Rachel want to speak offline and kind of give each other a better sense of where they can come together to work towards the common goal. They're also going to start sharing minutes from their meetings with each other so that everybody knows kind of what everybody's doing. Again, to avoid that overlap. But overall, the sense is Arts Forward Bloomington is focusing on kind of like the big picture, going into the small picture, starting with, transportation, big things that affect both the artists and the organizations and the citizens. Whereas all of those things matter to Arts Alliance. They're increasingly focused or starting with the artists by having the online gallery right now until they can open, and trying to support artists in any which way they can. One of their 2 things that I were very worried about at this point is artists experiencing homelessness and pay overall, the fact that nobody's getting paid for much these days. Checking my notes here. Yeah, I think that those are the main things. Arts Alliance is looking for a permanent physical space. They don't know exactly when that's going to happen or under what capacity, but that is one of their goals so that they can start to create more of a community center for the arts kind of thing. But, we don't know if that's going to be next year or 5 years from now. So that is my update on that. Do you have any questions?
I have a few, but I'll yield to the commission first.
I don't think the commission has questions.
I just asked it, with all the Arts Alliance and all the different groups, what was the place that had the thing in the mall?
That's Arts Alliance. So they started Art Beat, which is a space for performances, a gallery. Artists can sell their stuff. So right now it's closed, obviously. So all of the art is available online. And that's what they're focusing on. But they also want to create a very robust, you can sell art classes and photography courses and whatever it is that all of the different artists have to offer to their membership and beyond.
And they want a new, different place than the mall?
Eventually, they want their own space because they have a good arrangement with Simon Malls right now, but they are at the mercy of if Simon Malls actually finds somebody who wants to rent that space and pay full price, they do take priority. Sean?
Oh, yeah. Nobody else? Okay. Do they specifically, I assume it's probably from Artisan or from Art Alliance. I mean, has there been an uptick of artists being displaced in housing? Is there like a direct, are they tracking that directly, or is it they just concerned about that? I'm just curious.
We did not dive deep into it because we were covering a lot of stuff, but it is something that was mentioned several times. Part of it, I think, is a personal concern, not necessarily the board is concerned about this, but it is a flag, and it's something that I felt we needed to listen to.
Yeah, no, I'm just curious. Obviously, the cities invest in those kind of conversations.
Yeah.
Right. So, and then I guess the other thing too about pay was it ever brought up to like certify Artisan Alley or Art Alliance? I don't know if everybody's aware of this, but there's a group called Wage, right? And they certify institutions and organizations based on arts markets, and that might be one way that, like, basically it justifies how you, like, based off of the space you occupy, how much you should pay an artist for having an exhibition, right? Or so that might be some direction. If that's a direction that I think one of the things that will be interesting, both with both Artisan Alley and Art Alliance now being under the kind of helm of Adam's leadership, he's really good at running spaces and running consignment shop type experiences, which is, I think, was a leap for Art Alliance. So that it's going to be kind of interesting. Elliot, thank you for getting that in there. So that's just something to report back out, that Wage might be interesting, but I'll be curious to see how the Artisan Alley, Art Alliance.
Yeah, I think it'll take them a good 6 months to settle into a new kind of leadership position, figure out what they're going to do. And also, I think they're waiting to see what COVID has in store for them come the summer.
Well, and just for the rest of the commission, just so everybody knows this too, Artisan Alley has historically rented from city properties that were under short-term leases for either demolition or sale. And that's kind of the same thing that I think Art Alliance of Greater Bloomington obviously has with Simon Malls. So that's, as we think about the Waldron conversations, as we think about the convention center, hospital, that's always been kind of a concern about anchoring the arts somewhere. And that's been a kind of a challenge with kind of the free market here, so to speak, is that artist spaces never really get a long-term lease. They only get short-term leases. So that's just for all of us to kind of just put on the back burner.
Yeah, but the overall consensus was they're very appreciative of the meeting, and they look forward to ongoing conversations so that we start to become kind of like a unit in a way, just all part of the same community with the same goals. Any questions regarding that or comments? All right, we'll move on to the next item on the list, social media. Valeria Nessens. Any progress or anything?
Yeah, we, the two of us had a very productive brainstorming session last month, and we came up with a few ideas on what we can post on Facebook and on Instagram versus on Instagram, using Facebook mostly for updates on like the business of BAC, and Instagram, we've talked about this before, I believe, more so for connecting with the community at large. So definitely putting out the BAC news, like when the meetings are, when the grant cycles begin, RFQs, community hours when that begins. We like the idea of having public art around town, and like a spotlight on the artists involved, as well as, maybe you guys will like this, a Meet the Commissioners series where we hi, share a photo, maybe your roles within the BAC, and outside in the rest of the community as well. Oh yay, we got a yes in the chat. And then, oh, I am taking notes on what seems like important upcoming dates, because we will be planning the calendar hopefully a month in advance so that everything can be approved and scheduled and all of that, so we don't have to post everything live. But if there are any dates that you want to make sure, or any information that you want to make sure is posted on social media, send that information to Valeria and I, and we'll write up some copy. We still have to touch base about this, Valeria, but I think that launching in March would be great if we can have the calendar set by like a week or two in advance. So the only thing that I request is the BAC logo. We would need that from Sean or Bryony or whoever has that file.
Yeah, we'll make that. We'll get you that. Sean, is there
Awesome.
anything that you need to do or approve or whatever in order to start like an Instagram account? I know the Facebook one already exists, and we would need to provide you.
Yeah, I think just general like guidelines on how we're using the content and everything, or like what we're going to be posting about. So having a framework about the difference between Facebook and Insta will be helpful for me. So as we build that out, yeah, that's easy. And then and no problem on the logo. We'll be able to do that here shortly. So.
Okay, Valeria and I will email you. We got a Google Docs going. Maybe we'll send some notes back and forth before we send it to you, but we'll send it soon, and maybe then you can reply with the logo.
Yeah, perfect.
Can you make sure to CC me on that as well, please? Sounds good. Any questions? Sam?
I just have a thought about the social media. Well, like especially Instagram, like faces do well. So I don't know if do we want to have faces and, people interacting with the art? That was a thing I kind of took away from something we read the other day that was like the art is not just for passersby. There's actually like people using the art or interacting with it, whatever. But just that as an example, when it was not winter, not covered in snow, I would go biking with my daughter and we'd like take photos in front of the art. And I just posted on my own personal social media, but if I would be fine to release those images if you guys wanted that sort of thing. And which would kind of tie in, I was thinking on Friday with Babette's idea of like a map of all the different art around town. Like I literally did that with my daughter. Like I just biked around and like, here's the new cigar bench thing on 4th Street and behind the bars. And then like, there's a bunch like right in a row on 4th Street that I did. So I have photos of us at those. So now I'm just rambling, but I'm just giving those as examples. Like you could do like a little tour that would Babette had this idea to have like a map of all the public art that we have. And so like maybe wrap that in with social media.
Yeah, I mean, you can definitely pin those locations. And ideally, we would start that, but eventually community members would start to tag their own pictures with VAC and the locations and that kind of stuff. And we can get more voices into it.
I love that idea. It would be fun to have more of the commissioners do a similar thing so that it could catch on. But I think that it may even be cool to have a follow Sam around.
Yeah, I mean,
around Bloomington, like you can be the face of that series if you were into that. But either way, I think it could work.
I did that at gallery night for a while. I would go around all the galleries for Limestone Post, so I'm used to it. Yeah, I'll try to, if there's a thread, I'll try to send a photo. We have especially good one of the new mural on the Graduate, that really colorful one that Nina Chanel, I think, I'm blanking her name if that's right, but there's a good photo of that. It photographs well.
Rachel, do you have updates on the website?
No, I've not had a chance to get to the outline of it, but I can by the end of this weekend.
All right.
Sorry, I have
No worries.
been slammed, and yeah.
Babette, do you have anything to share on the community hour?
Yes. I made a basic outline of everything. I have some input from Karen and from Quentin and from Barony, and not a lot of consensus, or a lot of consensus. At any rate, what I'd love to do is just set up a time. I'll just email everyone and that we just specifically discuss this, so that we can actually get it solidified. So if it's okay with everybody, I'll just send an email out, and we'll, for as many people who are interested. And if anyone else would like to comment, just let me know and I'll send you the document as it is so that we can start, so we can get as much consensus as possible. Essentially, it's to have a BAC Community Arts Hour. At this point, we think it would be best to do it around a cocktail time, about 4:30, 5 o'clock in the afternoon. To do it once a month, we need to pick a day, either a Tuesday, a Wednesday, or a Thursday. So if there's any particular time that isn't good, or that anybody thinks is a lot better, we like to know. Essentially, in terms of programs, we would, there was a question of whether we would start out with an introduction to both the BAC, the BUEA, the IAC, and BEAD, all as one session. A couple of people thought that maybe that was unnecessary. I personally feel that it is kind of, that this is going to grow and it is necessary to do. And then we would kind of go into topics that would range from public art, grant writing, which would include marketing, advertising, social media, broadcast media, etc. Maybe something about traditional art versus contemporary art or political art. Another thing on selling your work. It would not just be visual art, but it would this will include all art such as theater and dance. We would also try to do something that would be meeting the recipients of BAC grants. And then if we ever get to reopening, it could be an open table discussion about reopening from as many groups that would like to come. Another one on using social media and the role of local media, and et cetera, et cetera. So there are lots of topics. One of the other comments that was made is that we need to be able to get other people in the art community to both present and to monitor. And I think that's really important, that it's not us giving lectures, that we're there, just there to introduce, and that as many other topics that anyone has, I think we're really open to, and that we should just try to get this, it's a good time to begin this. And I did have two questions. I think that Karen had mentioned that there were sessions that BAC had previously done that were good. So I'm not sure if I misinterpreted that or there were. So would I misinterpreted that? Okay. And again, any other topics that people have that are of interest to the arts community. And the last question I had is that, do we have a mailing list that's viable to make announcements to the general public, our public?
Sort of unofficial, but we do have a list of contacts.
Yeah, depending. What are you getting at, Babette? Like, I mean, we could do a press release, but we also have like I have a listserv of grants and arts organizations and small businesses and stuff like that. So
we do have something in one place. Okay. Great.
Babette, I think you may have misunderstood my comments, which is often an email, but I suggested that if we do some of these, we could actually double duty them with things like if we had an open grant session, for example, an information session, or I assume a public art session as well, when explaining to people the RFQs or whatever. So that was my comment, not that we've been doing this before, but I think that we do some outreach already and that we could
and to combine it
on those. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that was also one of the points that Quentin made also. Yeah, which absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Babette, let me know if you want help putting together like a scheduling poll so that everybody can tell you when they're available. Any other questions or comments?
And just if anybody else wants to work on this, please.
All right. So let's move on. Karen, I know you started early because a few months early on the Cross Commissions collaboration, just starting to make a list and toy with the idea. Do you want to share?
Well, yeah, that's just about it. I actually went through, looked at the different commissions and sort of saw what they did and made a preliminary list of ones I thought that we might be able to interact with, that we might have some simpatico with in terms of the arts. I think you and I will be working on that. Bryony and I will be working on that. And so we'll have to figure out what our strategy is for keeping those lines of communications open. It's probably pretty simple, just having a contact and sharing minutes and whatever.
I was on a focus group for commissions earlier this week or last week. I can't even remember at this point. But overall, there was a lot of interest from other commission chairs to start to collaborate between the commissions. That was something that everybody was saying was needed more. So I'll just
I think it would be good to have specific contact people.
Yeah.
So we can keep those lines of communication open.
And since we have you here, do you want to give us an update on the Public Art Emerging Artists Toolkit that you started to work on as well? Karen has been very busy this month.
The boredom has set in. I'm a little confused about that. I did start working on it, and then my vision about it was to be a toolkit, much like we are putting together for the public art master plan for emerging artists, and it would be more or less, I think, maybe a list, a directory of where you could go for, say, business advice or marketing, or what the arts organizations are, and list them and have information. But I got stymied, first of all, because it was listed under public art, and I wasn't sure that's where it really, I figured either I misunderstood what it was supposed to be about, or maybe it needs to belong more with the General Commission rather than public art. And the second thing was that my experience has been with the visual arts. And so if it's going to be thorough and really include all of the arts, I think that I'd really appreciate some partnership with someone from the performing or musical arts as well. I see this as maybe being more connected to the website that Rachel's working on. Just like an information gathering and, have all that information in one place. So that when, say a new artist comes into town or, someone is an emerging artist or, starting out in whatever, there would be one place where they could go to find out a lot of information that artists ask, but it's often hard to find. So if anybody, with some, experience in the other arts wants to be involved in this, I would really appreciate it. And probably hope to be working with Rachel if we think that's the way it would go.
Yeah, I think that sounds good.
Can I ask a potentially dumb question? Is there a difference between the toolkit that you're talking about and the toolkit that we've talked about as part of the public art master plan? I mean, it sounds like there is, but I guess what I'm wondering is, could they be folded into one, sort of hub of information, or is there sort of like a distinct vision for them?
I had that thought as well. And, it may, I think they are a little bit different just in their perspective because the public art is specifically about public art. And I think there would be a lot of artists that don't do public art, but do other kinds of art. And I'm still early on thinking about this, but there could be different resources depending on whether it's public art or not. But I think it's feasible to put it all together too.
Yeah, I think there's going to be a lot of overlap. Sorry, Nick. But if you think about, the amount of money that would go for a public art project versus a specifically emerging artist, I mean, even our track record is we don't put the big pots of money on an emerging artist that has no track record, right? So there are some distinct differences in what the fabricators would be, what the resources would be, where the funding would come from for an emerging artist versus an established artist. But at the same time, I think there is a lot of overlap that can live on both toolkits.
Cool, that makes sense. Basically, what I was trying to suss out is whether, they just had different focuses, or whether one was distinctly narrower than the other, such that it could be sort of nested within the other. But maybe we just sort of see how they both evolve on their, parallel paths, and then, we can.
And then we reassess. Yes.
Yeah. Cool. That makes sense.
I would think that a lot of the resources are shared and then a lot are specific. So we might have to think of more creative formats if we want to combine it.
Well, I think also too, I'd be happy, Karen, to potentially throw in the BEAD support and some BEAD funding towards something. And we talked about this in the public art planning meeting, but I'm happy to broker a meeting with Aaron Erdman White and Talisha from DBI, because if you're going to expand it into the performing arts thing, which I think we should, that we could have some other players, like the BCT has, is technically the downtown visitors center. It's supposed to be that for the city, their box office, right? So there's some outlets that we could try to maybe work with and work in tandem with, so it's not solely on you all or the BEAD or Aaron or Visit Bloomington, right? We could maybe partner and think through some kind of because I do get inquiries all the time about, I just moved here, I'm doing video game design, and I usually send people to the mill, right? I guess the one challenge that we will always have, and this has kind of come up in the conversation today, is that spaces move and evolve and change. Artisan Alley might be wherever they're at for only 2 more years, right? So it's just the upkeep and the maintenance of where resources and what organizations are around. There's a natural ecosystem and lifespan to these organizations. So that's just something that I don't know how we want to how often do we want to check in on that, and or do we just create like a website landing page and it's a timestamp and that's what it is? That's just something to think about for that kind of phase of what we're talking about.
Anything else? All right. Does anybody else have updates on other parts of the strategic plan implementation that I did not cover today? All right. Staff report. Sean, take it away.
Yeah, I'll try to keep it brief so that we can maybe, wrap up early. So the big thing, and I brought this up to the Public Art Planning Committee, with the displacement of the Waldron and its future still being pursued by the task force, the likelihood of, I think a lot of people, naturally associate that venue with theater and live performance. But also there's two pretty, in terms of the visual art landscape, two galleries that have been pretty sought after, and it's caused some concern in the community around what are we doing around the so-called the loss of it's more than two gallery spaces, but I would say that the two on the main floor are the premier gallery spaces, because loss of that in the community. So every year, for the past couple of years, the IAC has offered small amount of funding to support projects. So we've funded a bead summit, we've funded murals, we've funded the traffic box program with the Bob Ross mural, stuff like that. So I put in a grant application. It still is yet to be approved, but to investigate and think about, and this might tie into Quentin's proposal, this might tie into a lot of different things, but looking at some opportunities to put some visual artists' work on display, either through storefronts in the community or spaces that the city owns. For example, we don't see this foreseeing these spaces being leased anytime soon, but both of the parking garages have commercial space. As of right now, nobody has responded to our RFI around that. So there is an opportunity for us to think about some kind of window display. The easiest recollection of this, or the easiest kind of thing I could point to, is actually there's vacant storefront at the Graduate Hotel that they usually put up the football season or basketball games and a variety of those things. So that would be a visual representation of what I kind of applied for the grant for. But obviously it's a little bit open, but I wanted to just present that as something to think about, and maybe sit on, and then either shoot me an email or we can set up a call. But some kind of way to think about activating some of that this year, right? Just because the loss of the Waldron being a venue as a particular gallery, I think is scary to a lot of visual artists here. We could. So the grant is for $4,000. We would have some in-kind costs associated with that, and I would probably match some of that. So it's not a ton of money, but it's enough to do some kind of ongoing series, maybe attached to Gallery Walk or vice versa. So just wanted to throw that out there. That's a lot to chew on. It's still obviously being kind of formatted, and who knows, the IAC might provide feedback and say, no, we can't fund it or whatnot. But that's kind of where I'm at with the IAC funding, just to keep you all in the loop on that. And I welcome any questions or comments or thoughts, or if you've heard anything about the Waldron stuff from visual artists or even performing artists, I'm happy to kind of report out on that.
Oh, sounds great. I think there's definitely potential on the idea, and I think we could do something fun.
Yeah, I mean, I can't, my initial thought was to fund. So another thing that we need to think about as the commission that we haven't, with Joanna's leave of absence and the COVID and teaching and everything, we never really did anything public around the space needs assessment. And with the Waldron conversations, I was thinking of following up a feasibility study and a market study for arts venues, because Joanna's report was very like first phase. Program isn't going to cover that at all. So it's just a thing that that's going to take a lot more money, frankly. So I didn't want it to be a wash in that.
Any questions? Sean, is there any update on the Waldron itself?
I think Karen was going to ask a question, though. Karen, were you about to say something?
I had a question in general of you. Something came across my email today about that Jordan River, City River, the underground. Mm-hmm. And I was wondering if I think it was supposed to start February 15. So I was wondering where we were on that project, if that was something we still wanted to consider doing.
Yep, absolutely. So that is in the works. We're currently trying to figure out the funding mechanism, and there is a conversation. So utilities is actually not, they're a separate entity, but they are part of the city, right? So the question is, does the 1% apply? Can that be applied to a utility project? We're looking at funding. We do want to pursue some kind of arts opportunity there as that project happens. For the rest of the commission who aren't aware of this, we're doing a culvert redo of the Jordan River, which runs through the city, and it's a hidden river. And the mayor and members of the Utilities Commission are very interested in how art could be a conversation to talk about watershed issues. Eventually, Jordan River actually runs into Clear Creek, which then runs into the White River, and then Wabash, and then the Ohio, and then down to the Mississippi. So it's a really important watershed for this region. And so where we are at right now is figuring out how much money we have, potentially for a project, and then potentially funding some kind of marker series that would mark where the river is. Maybe commissioning or working with a poet. There is a poet here who has written extensively about the Jordan River, and maybe that individual would want to work with the Art Commission on a particular project, maybe Poetry in the Sidewalk or something like that, right? And then potentially a sound artist. So that's where we've left it. It's a matter of figuring out where the funding is and what our budget is. I think initially we could have gone out to do an RFQs and then tried to find the money, but I think it's better to know what our budget is. COVID obviously has impacted a variety of things. And I know that utilities is really interested, and they've looked into this, which is kind of could be a potential art installation in collaboration with a sculptor of some kind. But they are looking into, apparently you can get see-through like plate manhole covers so that you can actually see the Jordan River in certain capacities. Just so you all know, when the Jordan River leaves campus, it really does become kind of a trickle. It's not, I would say that a river is a generous word for what it is. And maybe that's something to be potentially renamed as well, because IU is looking at the renaming of Jordan Avenue. So yeah, river is generous on campus as well. So Karen, that's just an update. I literally just had a meeting yesterday about it. So I'm hoping to bring that up at the next Public Art Planning Committee for everybody. But if you all hear anything about, the Waldron updates, the task force is meeting regularly. They are still looking at recommendations by April. So I know, Bryony, you represent that. So those
we're on track.
Yeah. So I know there's been a variety of stakeholder meetings and all that kind of stuff. So
yeah, there's been focus groups, stakeholder meetings, and then there's just a lot of review, and the chairs are really dotting their I's and crossing their T's and talking to a lot of people to make sure that we find the best recommendation.
On that note too, I think I've invited Bryony and Essence, but I want to open this up to anybody in the commission as well. I'm doing a series of check-ins. I started to do this during COVID, so any of the commissioners are welcome to do this. I have a scheduled call with some of the festivals just to see where they're at. The big ones that close streets like 4th Street and those kinds of things. And then I'm doing a performance arts check-in. I won't be covering much about the Waldron, but just to check in about, what's on the horizon for 2021. What are they concerned about? Is there, things that we need to be aware of, or those kinds of things. So I'm happy if anybody wants to, I'm happy to add you to that. So feel free to either follow up via email and whatnot. And on that note as well, the IAC, well, not the IAC, Columbus Area Arts Council is looking for reviewers for their Region 9 grant. If anybody's interested in that, I'm happy to forward that email. It unfortunately likely will coincide with our grant timeline in April. I know Rachel's done it before in the past. She can speak to it. It's pretty extensive and pretty structured because it's state funding and it's like recorded, and then you have to talk about it live. So it's a very different process, Elliot. In essence, it's very different from what you just went through, but it's a good process and it's a good way to build relationships with the state, to see how some other funding mechanisms happen, and then also to see what's happening in a community adjacent to ours. So just FYI, if anybody's interested, feel free to drop me an email.
Hey, Sean, we're Region 8 though, right?
Yeah, we're Region 8.
Why would they want reviewers from outside of the region?
You can't review your own region due to conflict of interest. So you have to review in another region.
I see. I got it. Cool.
Because basically the way the state works is they have kind of like an allotted amount per region. So the funds that are in Region 9 like would never go to Region 8 anyways. Because it's built on like density and population and all that stuff.
All right. Any questions for Sean? Otherwise, we'll go to commissioner announcements. Anybody have anything to share? This is sad. I like to hear what everybody's up to stuff.
I'll go. I'll give some work-related stuff. I can't remember if I've mentioned this previously, but two of our labels, Jag Jaguar and Secretly Canadian, are celebrating their 25th anniversary this year, and we have a series of releases and initiatives tied to both. Secretly, as we're going to announce in a couple of weeks, there's a heavy charitable fundraising element, hoping to raise 6 figures plus in support of New Hope for Families, shelter and services. So we'll have a number of releases where the entirety of our revenue will go towards that. And so once we announce, we'll also be looking to tap into some other like local business partnerships for other fundraising avenues. And then for Jag Jaguars, we're doing a quarterly series, Jag Quarterly, and we're announcing that tomorrow. We've already been sort of teasing it, but the first is we're collaborating with a Bloomington-based poet and professor at IU, Ross Gay. I believe this is the first recording of his work. He went into a studio and did it himself, and we have 5 different musicians who have provided musical accompaniment as like a sort of a bed beneath it. So yeah, we're gonna put out a poetry record, and
so good.
yeah, and like the video that we have for the first piece, which Bon Iver did the music for, is pretty phenomenal. So take a look at that tomorrow. That's what I got.
Anybody else? All right. Well, everybody go sledding, play in the snow. I don't know. Keep yourselves busy. And we'll see you next month.
Bye.